like to welcome everyone to the Art Hangout, talking about balancing work and life in the field of architecture, which is a pretty hot topic, especially right now. So we are joined by 5 professionals, Colin, Elaine, Jonathan, Joshua, and Nianta. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Nianta, pretty close.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give a second to allow you guys to kind of introduce yourself. So if Colin, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Colin Thompson. I am a 2017 KU architecture grad with my master's in architecture. Then I also graduated in 2018 with a master's in urban planning. I live in Seattle and I work for a company called BRR Architecture. My primary focus is hospitality. And then I also do a little bit of work in retail.
Awesome. Elaine, do you want to?
Hi, I'm Elaine Gallagher Adams. I am 1994 architecture grad, 100 years ago. I teach architecture, urban design, sustainable design, preservation, and collaborative courses at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. And out there, I am the director of sustainability for the largest architecture firm in the Southeast, LSP.
Awesome. Then moving on to Jonathan, if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm Jonathan Brown. I'm a principal at JHP Architecture. We're an architecture firm here in Dallas. We do a lot of mixed-use urban infill, retail placemaking, urban planning, that sort of thing. We're about 80 people, all in one office. I graduated in 98 with a B.Arch 2, so I'm old school. And happy to be here.
Awesome. And Joshua?
Hi, my name is Joshua Bender. Graduated from KU in 2009. Did Studio 804 when I was there. Did a house in Kansas City. First LEED Platinum home in Kansas City. I work for M+H Architects here in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an architect and BIM manager there.
Awesome. And last, but certainly not least, Nianta?
Yeah. Hi, I'm a 2011 grad of KU. I did the health and wellness studio. I think I was in the second group of students that went through that. And I am an architect at ESA Life Structures. We're located across the country, but I'm at the office here in Kansas City.
Awesome. So great to see. We have coast-to-coast coverage here. So with that out of the way, again, the topic for this is going to be balancing work and life in the field of architecture, which is a pretty important topic for architecture students and professionals. So if any of the students in the call have questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. But we do have questions written by our exec team here for the AIAS chapter. And the first one is, how is your commitment to your profession different than or similar to what you expected? So fresh out of architecture school, what was the commitment that you sought? And we'll once again start off with Colin and go down the line.
I guess, could you clarify the question a little bit? When you're talking about commitment, you mean actual like work requirements, or?
Yeah, so like fresh out of college, what were you expecting as far as a workload versus what actually ended up being the workload?
Yeah, I think coming out of architecture school, everyone has this experience of, being in studio for crazy hours. And to some extent, I kind of expected that to relay into the field. And I think a lot of it depends upon the firm that you're at. One of the things that BRR stresses pretty heavily on internally is having that balance. That's primarily just the makeup of our firm. We have a lot of people who have families, and so understanding that's important. I think generally for us, we're averaging anywhere between 45 to 55 hours a week, which is probably, a comfortable level, I think, for most people. I think the really important thing to kind of understand and figure out as you're coming out of school is looking at what level of workload you're comfortable with handling and managing, because I think a lot of people don't quite understand to know when to voice that too much work is on their plate. And that's okay. People can only expect you to work so much, but understanding how to voice that up to your management team and your leadership, I think, is kind of the most critical thing to figure out and manage as you're making that transition from school into professional practice.
Yeah. Awesome. And Elaine, do you have more on the topic from your perspective?
I have a different perspective for sure. When I was in school, I actually had my oldest daughter while I was still in grad school. So I was extremely disciplined with my time. I had to go pick her up at infant daycare, and if I didn't, they would report me. So I was already into a very regular schedule. I knew going into work that I would have to maintain that regular schedule. I then followed that one with a second child, and very narrow at that point. I was working part-time until my kids were a little older, and then I went full-time when they started going to daycare or preschool. It hasn't been until recently that I've really worked long hours, because I now have 2 jobs that are really important to me. With a climate change deadline in 2030, I am personally really driven to do everything I can for the next 10 years. And that, for the first time ever, it's really starting to take a toll on my personal life.
Then jumping right over to Jonathan, care to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. I mean, when I came out of school, it was pretty much exactly what I thought. I thought it would, like Colin mentioned, it starts off as like a 45 to 55 hour kind of thing, sometimes a little bit more. It's very sporadic, just as it is in studio. It's project based. You might have a few weeks where it's totally normal, and then a couple weeks it's really hard because you're trying to, get a project out or something like that. It also just differs in what kinds of things you're working on. Being on the front side of things in design, it's a lot more chaotic. Schedules are a lot shorter. And rather than being in more of the CD phase or something like that, where it's more of an elongated kind of timeline, you can kind of plan out your months or whatever. But honestly, so a lot of it can be driven by the firm, but it's mostly internal. It's what you want to put into it and how efficient you want to be. I found over the years, I'm the type of person that would always put my head down and work while I was at work. I wasn't the kind of person that walked around and talked to people. Now there's some bad things about that too, but I was able to be pretty fast with what I do and get it done very quickly. That's one of the things that always helped me as a designer, is to be able to design very, very quickly. And that'll help you if you can work pretty fast and good. But it's about finding what you're good at in developing that. And that's hard for the first few years, because it's just you just want to be a sponge and absorb things, right? And the more time you spend doing that, the better off it is. So it's easy to kind of rack up extra hours and do more things because you want to have more exposure and stuff like that. So it's definitely a caution but a lot of it, I found over the years, very little of it is really instilled by the firm, like expecting you to be up there all night or all weekend. It's really about how much time you put in yourself.
Awesome. And Joshua, care to expand upon that maybe, or give your own experience?
I would echo a lot of the same thoughts that have already been expressed. I mean, I think for me personally, I think it does come down somewhat to your firm and what their expectations are and their workload. Another big consideration is the size of projects you're working on. Larger projects tend to have longer deadlines. So, I mean, the biggest push is always when a deadline's coming up, because if you're not working towards a deadline, you shouldn't necessarily be killing yourself working hours. If you are, then you guys don't have the project scheduled right. So a big part of it does come down to time management. If you slack, for a couple of weeks during a project, then you're going to have to make up that time at some point. But hopefully you're working at a firm that you're a part of that decision making on scheduling out a project. I know that's what our firm does a really great job on, is being very transparent and getting the people who are working on the project involved in budgeting and scheduling a project. So when there's an expectation that a project needs to be done in 2 months, we actually have some sort of validation that that's possible, and the people working on the team know that that's going to happen. So I think it's all about expectations that you have for yourself and managing your own time and being efficient, like John said.
Yeah. All right. Great insight. And finally, if Nianta wants to expand upon that or give her ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's kind of covered the gist of it. Is it's really about time management. It's about efficiency. But when I first got out of school and I started working, I just remember the comments like, "Oh wow, you get that done really fast. Like, how do you already do that?" So I think a way that you kind of do better in that environment with working is that you have a task and you have focused time to complete it. And especially when you're first out of school, you're given kind of miscellaneous tasks to start to gauge and see where you're at and what tasks people feel comfortable giving you. So I think that's really an opportunity to shine, is right when you get out of school. It's explore anything that anyone wants to have you do it. Put your best foot forward, and that's how you can start to figure out where your interests lie, because you really figure that out when you start working. So just wanted to share that.
Awesome.
And Ethan, if I can add into, I think one big thing that people don't necessarily think about during the your career growth is coming out of school. Like was just mentioned, you're really focused on completing tasks that are assigned to you. And as you kind of develop into project management, firm leadership, you're going to start getting more and more responsibilities. And we kind of have the mantra that, you always have to be available for your clients. So if a client calls me at on a Saturday and wants to chat through, obviously there's a degree of managing client expectations that are thrown in there, but that added responsibility of not only completing your projects, quality controlling projects, redlining projects, but then also client management just grows on the tasks and your available time frame. And then, throwing in there the process of licensure. That was one thing I definitely will recommend, getting as much studying, test taking when you have that time availability right out of school as you can. And maybe that's a question we'll discuss down the road a little bit, but I would highly recommend kind of using that time as you're coming out of school and not managing those client responsibilities and expectations to really push towards licensure. It really benefited me.
Yeah. Awesome. So moving on to the next question, since I feel like you guys have kind of set the tone for what out of school workload is going to be, what is it like having family or keeping up with family and friends once you start the field of architecture? A lot of you sometimes mention that it can be a workload. So how do you keep up with that? And we're going to snake back around. So we'll start with Nianta, if you want to kick us off.
Sure. It goes back to prioritizing, right? Like you have to manage your time. You have to know what those tasks are at hand, and almost like compartmentalize your life a little bit in terms of that. If you want to balance that family life, I mean, if you want to work forever, you could work forever on a detail or on whatever you're working on. But I think it's finding your skill set to be able to do it efficiently, to be able to make room in your lives for friends and family. But I think the biggest factor, even more than time for friends and family, is who you are when you show up with them. Being able to leave work at work and be you with friends and family. I think that was one thing that I struggled with a lot when deadlines are going on and when things are stressful. Even if I meet up with friends after, working through a major deadline, it's like, they're like, who are you and what happened to you? And that's part that took a little bit of time to figure out, is that, okay, leave it at work, let it go, and just be you again. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is really don't let it take over your world outside of work. Try and figure out what tools you need to brush that off. I think that's been a big learning point for me.
Awesome. Josh, have any comments to expand upon that or give some more insight?
Yeah, I thought those were a lot of good points that you brought up there for sure. I mean, I think a big part of it is, like I said before, managing your time, and I think managing your stress level is also very important in this field. I mean, it's not necessarily even how many hours you're working in a week. And we've been talking about this recently at our firm because burnout's become more and more of an issue the busier and busier we get. That even if you're not putting in crazy hours, sometimes it's the work that you're working on and how much mental capacity it takes to do. So even if you're only working 40 hours a week, but every single thing you have to figure out and think about very hard, it's almost more stressful. So it's one, figuring out your timelines on a project and when to get things done so that you're not doing all that heavy thinking at once, but also understanding at the end of the day, I mean, it is a job, and I'd say that your outside life is probably more important than your job. So it's not worth, stressing out about to the point where, like she said, that you're affecting your relationships and outside life.
Continuing to get just some great insight here. Jonathan, do you have anything to follow this up with?
Yeah, one thing I'll say is you guys are really lucky that with technology the way it is now, it affords a lot of versatility. About 15 years ago or something like that, we got a reliable remote desktop service at our firm, and so I was able to do some significant work from home, which was nice because I'm kind of like an early riser. I like to get up at, if I've got a lot of work to do, I'd much rather work early than stay up late. And so if I've got some overtime to put in or something to really need to work on, I'll get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning and work on that for a couple hours. But then I can still have breakfast with my family, and and then head into the office or something like that, right? You can kind of like break it up like that. And I think that's an important thing, is to find the way it works for you. And very much like what was been saying before, is it's very personal in how you deal with your family and how you deal with your friends and how you kind of plug into them and be there for them and kind of section that out. And so that's one of the things that worked really well for me, is being able to kind of find my time and break it down in that way because of technology. I think you guys are really fortunate with that you can kind of be anywhere, but also choose to disconnect when you want to.
Yeah, great tips for using the resources we have available to us. Elaine, do you have any more suggestions on how to keep that balance?
Definitely. For starters, the people you love are always more important than your job. Always. Unfortunately, I think the divorce rate among architects is almost a third of all architects now. There's a reason for that. So just know that and try not to be a statistic. It is a very demanding job, as we've talked about. And we have a different head than a lot of other people. So that divorces may be caused by anything from scheduling to, disagreeing on how to hang a picture. Who knows? But the family part is so important, and it's not to be underrated. I used to bring my kids to work quite often if they were sick. You can't have a kid with a fever in daycare, so they came to work with me. A blanket and a coloring book, and stuck them under the footwell of my table, of my desk, and they were there all day, and nobody even knew it. My kids thought I colored for a living, which I thought was hilarious. They have great memories of being in my office, and I'm privileged to work in extraordinary environments where my kids were really inspired. Neither one went into architecture, but they're both very artistic, and they went to garden and didn't know scissors, but they knew how to use a blade, which felt like a terrible parent. But a lot of times I felt like a terrible parent, and it's okay. We all do. Don't bring that weight with you. The kids don't know you're a terrible parent. They just think you're mom and dad. you do the best you can. I was never a room mom. I didn't have any time for that. If I had to make, somebody once suggested that I make all the costumes for a swimming event, and I laughed. I'd like, no, I'll buy swimsuits that match, and that's it. I can't make costumes. So we do have trade-offs, but at the same time, where I think our kids have a unique perspective that I know their friends didn't have, and they always had the coolest projects in class because they had all the right materials. When you're in the 3rd grade and you do your special project on black foam core, that's pretty cool.
Well, great tips on just being a parent. I know architecture can be a hard major alone and a hard field, so being a parent can be just as hard as well, if not harder. But Colin, do you have anything to follow up with that on any of the comments that have previously been said?
Yeah, I think Jonathan's point about setting aside time for family and finding that flexible schedule, if your firm allows, is really critical. One thing my fiance and I do is just make sure we always sit down and eat dinner together and have that one-on-one time. It's really important to have that connection. And then the other thing, like Nianta said, I think it's really important to figure out what hobbies really motivate you and recharge you, so that you're able to spend time with friends and family and be energetic and enthusiastic about activities you're doing. So whether that's working out, cycling, hiking, just figure out what kind of hobbies and activities you really enjoy to get away from work, so that you're recharged and re-energized, not only for friends and family, but once you get back in the office.
Great tips on keeping those connections alive. I know even inside of architecture school that can be hard, but I think definitely keeping these things in mind and kind of recognizing the importance of them. But aside from just relationships, do you ever feel like the field limits your ability to do things outside of the workplace, like hobbies that you may have started either in high school or even in college? But once you got into the field, you maybe had to sacrifice them a little bit more. And this time, we'll go ahead and start with Josh.
I'd say, by gosh, don't let it. Just don't let it. You've got to have hobbies, and you've got to get out, and you've got to do different things. And whether that's playing softball on Sunday nights or fishing or golfing or whatever it is, right? Make sure that you find a way to do it. And quite honestly, I'm the type of person, like, even in my professional world, when I go to conferences and stuff like that, I tend not to go to architecture conferences, aside from the fact that I hate being around architects. I find other people really interesting and inspiring in other professions, and I get inundated with architecture so much in my life that I find much more inspiration in going to something tangentially related that's got creative types in it. There's a conference in LA called SIGGRAPH. I was always plugged into like the technological side of things in design that I would go to, and there would be people from the movie industry there, and people that would design games, and people, educators, a bunch of different, we all had a little bit of crossover in the Venn diagram, but not a whole lot. But it was really fascinating to see what kind of crazy 3D collages an artist was doing or something like that. And I think it's important to hold on to those things and those things outside of the profession, because first of all, it's going to help keep you grounded, and second of all, it's going to give you all sorts of new ideas, because we can be very much an echo chamber. Everybody's looking at Arc Daily and talking about the same things, design the same way, and if you're not doing that, then you're going to be far more creative, I think.
Great tips and advice looking towards the outside world for inspiration, and just kind of getting away from it all. Josh, do you have anything you want to expand on that? Or
yeah, sorry if I don't know when I cut off before, but I moved to a different location, so hopefully my internet's better. But yeah, I definitely don't think this is a field that in any way limits you from having outside interests or doing things outside of work. I mean, yes, it's not your typical 8 to 5 job where it is deadline driven, so there are extra hours here and there sometimes, but I still think there's a lot of jobs that have way more overtime expectations. So I hope we're not scaring everyone. I personally don't find that I'm working a ton of overtime. I find overtime to be the exception, not the rule. So for me personally, me and my brother both have similar design interests, and we both like making things with our hands. So we actually have a woodworking business on the side. So I run another business in addition to my normal architecture job. So it's definitely possible to do other things while you're working. It's just all about time management and stress level. Like I was starting to say before, I think the biggest thing is understanding your body. And when you're working, I know I always feel like every project I could probably put more time into it if I had it. But there's a certain point when you have to realize kind of pencils down, and I can keep working on this, but the more time I work on it, the less efficient I'm going to be. And it's just not a good use of your time at work or in your life. So it's about realizing those kind of aha moments and kind of switching your mindset.
Awesome. We will go ahead and jump over to Elaine on that note.
I don't think it's ever stopped me from pursuing side hobbies. I love to cook, and I would actually say that architecture opened doors for side hobbies for me. I went to Italy for the summer with KU, and while I was there, my whole world opened up as far as cooking. And it changed how I ate. It changed how I cooked. It changed how I looked at food. Even before the slow food movement, I was on it. I'm still passionate about food. I've been exposed to watercolor. You learn a little bit about watercolor rendering, and all of a sudden you're doing other watercolors. I love just pursuing art on the side. Just because of the sedentary nature of our work, I've been very active. I'm an avid cyclist. I do yoga 3 times a week. Taking care of your body is really important, and it makes you happy. If you're fit and you're happy and you're healthy, you work better, you work smarter for sure. It keeps all the neurons firing, and life is much better. You've got to have outside interests. You have to turn off your engines. I always say you have to turn off your engines. When I get too into the work that I'm doing, my daughter says, "Mom, you have too many tabs open." And I say, You're right. Close the tabs. Go do something. Go for a walk. Go for a ride. It's nice.
If you want, Nianta, if you want to continue on the conversation train, feel free.
I think Jonathan, Joshua, and Elaine, you guys covered every point that I had. I mean, yeah. So I have nothing else to add. I think you guys all said it very, very well. Yeah.
Hey, Colin, do you have anything you want to add then?
Yeah, I think that those are all great points. I would just, reemphasize the fact that I think having outside interests and hobbies is really critical for just, your soft social skills. One of the greatest things about working at a firm is having relationships with your coworkers and with your clients. People want to work with, and they want to work alongside people they enjoy spending time with and can find things in common. So I would say, try to make an effort as much as possible to diversify yourself and be well-rounded in your interests and hobbies.
Great. Awesome. I think that more than sums up the question at hand, and you guys blew it out of the water.
Hi, I'm Lydia. So the next question is, how do you maintain a healthy work-life balance while studying for the licensure exams? Because a lot of us have heard that is really intense. And we can start with Colin.
Yeah. So I took all of my exams in 12 months. I kind of set a goal at the beginning of the year to kind of get through all of them and finish all my tests. And I think really it's just with people that you have those close relationships with, whether it be a significant other or family and friends, just being honest with them about the time and the dedication that you're going to have to devote to that. It is a pretty significant investment, and your friends and your family are really going to be there to support you through that. That was my experience, at least. My family is extremely supportive and understanding the time and dedication that it puts towards it. But I think it's just really kind of, we've talked and Josh talked a little bit about just making sure that you're planning your time schedules accordingly. You're looking at your project schedules and kind of making sure that you're not pushing everything off to the end, and just really looking at, your time management throughout the course of it, dedicating an hour or two, a day, or a couple hours on the weekends leading up to those exams to make sure that you're just pacing yourself and setting yourself up for success, I think is the biggest key that I have, so that you're not, drowning in it.
Thanks for informing us. Sorry about cutting out. I've gone ahead and joined my phone, so hopefully it will be fine from then on out. But on that note, let's go ahead and switch over to Joshua.
Yeah. So I think I'll hit it on the head there. I passed the exams under the previous version, which I think was 4.0. I think the biggest thing I found is, again, I feel like you could probably study for them forever, because before you take one, I think they're very intimidating to think about. And at least I found that a lot of stuff I studied never showed up on the exams at all. So the biggest thing I think for pushing yourself is scheduling your exam and then working backwards on what you need to do to study. Because if you just start studying and just never schedule an exam, you'll just never take it. I know that happened on the structural exam for me. I would also say reach out to your firm when you first start working. Most firms have a lot of great resources on study material. Depending on the size of the firm too, they might even have a study group. So use the resources at your disposal, and don't be afraid to, take the exam earlier than you think, because worst case is you waste a little bit of money, but time is money. So if you spend 2 more months studying and you could have passed 2 months earlier, I mean, that's probably more worth your time, is to take it earlier and get that experience first.
Hey, awesome. We'll go ahead and go on to Nianta. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with what Cullen and Joshua said, but, let your firm know that you're doing it too when you are. I think for me, I kind of informed my director and the principal of my projects that this is when I was going to be taking my test, or when I planned to. I kind of took that chance to rebalance work-life balance, and really pulled back to that 40, 45-hour max weeks. And then I was pretty rigid about my study schedule too. I would say 90 minutes a night on weeknights, and just really hold my focus. It kept it easy to stay in the study mode for that period of time, and then still get other stuff done, and then do a little more on the weekends. Like Colin said, family and friends, really make sure you have that support group for you, because it can get stressful while you're trying to balance it all. And even if you're just stressed out about it, it's helpful to have that support system. And then the biggest thing with the test, even while studying, it's building your confidence. So what I would do is I'd have a target date in mind for when I wanted to take it. I would work around my study schedule around that. And then as I was getting closer to that date, maybe 2 or 3 weeks out, I was actually able to schedule it. So I knew I was ready. So I wasn't freaking myself out. I felt confident. And then those last 2 weeks were less about material and more about just building the confidence, because it's such a mind game. It's just, you want to go in there feeling ready, and that'll help you do well. But yeah, talk to your coworkers about it. I mean, they'll be your self-esteem boosters throughout the day, even when you're trying to work but thinking about study material. They're going to be the ones that are going to be like, you got this. If I could do it, you can do it. And, just don't, for me at least, it helped not to bottle it up, and just everyone around me knew, and they were kind of my little cheerleaders as I went through it. So it helped.
Awesome. Yeah, great idea, keeping those around you and building them up as a support system. We always try and advocate for that kind of initiative. Elaine, do you have anything you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I want to reiterate the importance of working with the people at work. We had a study group. We met at lunch twice a week, and then Thursday nights we met after work. And I remember we had the flashcards, and we turned the flashcards into a drinking game. Is this being recorded? Anyway, we made it fun, and it was great, and I made lifelong friends, and that from that group we all really cheered each other on. That was back when the test had 9 sections. I took it all in 1 month. I don't have time to mess around. I had a family, things to do. I'm very driven. So I took all 9 sections in 1 month, 2 a week. And the last week I took the third one. The last one's like your state one. It's really short. But that was amazing. And when I came out of the testing center, got in my car, I burst into tears because it had taken me 14 years to get there. From the time I decided I want to be an architect to taking my last exam. And I was completely overwhelmed. It was an awfully long journey.
Yeah, it's really is a journey, and we're all in this process for it. So I'm sure all of us will have those strong of emotions when it comes to it. And Jonathan, do you have any final things you'd like to add on?
Real quick, yeah, I sympathize with Elaine. It took me 10 years to get registered, and one of the things about that is I think there's a good balance. I wouldn't necessarily worry about being the first person out the gate to get registered once you get once you graduate. There's a lot of stuff you learn in your first couple 3 years that you won't have to then study. You're going to absorb a lot of good information in that time. But like one of my mentors at the firm always told me, life never gets any less complicated. So you've got to balance that right. And like it's like the work-life balance of, I mean, you just got to figure out what works for you. For me, I'm kind of a lone wolf. I'm kind of an introvert. I'm not the kind of person that does well studying in groups. I finished it all in 9 months, but I took it 1 a month, and I would like cram the weekend before and take it on a Monday morning and just like, just let it all just explode out of my brain onto the test and be done with it. And that, I could shut myself in a room for 2 days and be ready for that exam. I didn't need to study 90 minutes a day or something like that. But I think it's one of those things that it's just, how does it work for you? Try and figure that out. I absolutely agree with the point about take one of the exams quickly. Who cares if you fail it? It doesn't matter. Nobody's keeping score. Right? Go see what the process is at the testing center. Go see what it feels like to sit in front of that and how to answer the questions and all that. Don't agonize over that first one. Just get it done and pick an easy one, do it, get it done. You fail it, who cares? You'll go back and it'll give you a lot of confidence going forward. Even if you didn't pass it, it'll give you a lot of confidence going forward.
Can I add one last thing? I think the biggest thing too is trying to have a strategy. Because like Jonathan said, there's some of those exams where you're really only going to know the information from being at work. You don't learn contracts in school. So the more experience you have, the easier those tests are going to be. But on the flip side, and I'm not sure how the new tests work, but I know for me, structures are still a test, and structures in the professional field is calling your structural engineer and asking them. So if I would have taken that test right out of school, that would have been the best time. So looking through the tests and kind of understanding what's on them and prioritizing, studying for this test might help me pass the next test, really helps too.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I think, like everyone's saying, taking that test to just get a feel for it is really critical. I did all of mine in ARE 5.0, so the new tests. And I think a lot of it is really just kind of figuring out what they're asking and how they're wording all of their questions. I think a lot of times, a lot of us think they're going in there trying to trick us. And it's just figuring out, like I said, how they're asking the question and getting a handle for acclimating yourself to that testing typology.
Awesome. Yeah, great tips to keeping it cool during the test process and keeping that mental health in check. And I just wanted to say, Elaine, your comment on taking the exams, uh, the hardest exams first is heard. So just so it's also in the recording. But now we're going to go ahead and go to our question we got from the students here. How do you deal with busy work or monotony in the workspace? And we'll go ahead and start with Elaine on this one.
Monotony at work? Suck it up. That's life. It's kind of what we do, but you can kind of turn it into a cathartic exercise depending on what you're doing. Some of us are a little OCD. Otherwise, we wouldn't do what we do. And sometimes it's really kind of nice to really focus on something, even if it's just stare details for a day and a half. And I know it's so funny at SCAD, we highlight all these amazing students that come out of all the other programs. And they never seem to highlight the recent grads of architecture because they say, well, what are they doing? Well, they're doing stair details. So you can't really make a movie out of that. So there's a lot of monotony in what we do, but there's so much that's interesting too. And one of the great things about our profession is that every single day is different. That's why I love it. That's why I love it. That's why I've been in this for 30 something years. It's fun. There's not actually that much monotony.
Awesome. We'll jump back to Colin if you have any tips on how to deal with any busy work you feel you might be getting.
Yeah, I think one of the big tips that I have is to really just look at every task you're given as, trying to do the best you can with it. You're kind of coming out of the field, and if you're the person that is, doing super good job detailing, stairs, like Elaine just talked about. If you're the person that becomes the expert on that, that's how you're going to start progressing in the field and moving up. So I think kind of looking at everything as a new opportunity to learn and grow and develop is a really good mindset to have. But then I also think it's kind of nice when you get something that's a little repetitive, because you'll get to the point where you're dealing with phone calls that just make you, scratch your head all day, and dealing with these high stress items that sometimes just putting in some headphones and just being able to, plug away drafting or plug away doing things that you're really familiar with becomes really relaxing and important to kind of just unwind a little bit.
Awesome. I know all of us architecture students are quite fond of putting in our headphones and just zoning out a little bit. But Nanta, I saw you shaking your head. Do you have anything you want to add on topic?
Yeah, I completely agree with Colin that, sometimes you need that, you need those monotonous tasks to kind of reset. And like Elaine said, is, every day is different in architecture, and that's what makes it a great profession. But sometimes you end up doing a lot of the same things. So for example, right now I have 5 or 6 projects that are all in construction. So I am doing construction administration constantly. So I have one little project that's in design, and the chance to just zone out and work on a schematic floor plan is so welcome after doing a lot of CA, answering questions, like Colin said, and some monotonous tasks like reviewing a door submittal, a door frames and hardware submittal, which once you get to those, that is the epitome of boring. So I think just learn to appreciate the various tasks you're given, and you'll get past it, but it's always going to be something different. So you're not going to be stuck in a corner doing a bunch of boring things for too long.
Awesome. Joshua, do you have anything you want to expand upon that?
Yeah, sure. I think something I would add to the conversation too is when you first start, if you find that you're doing a lot of things that you find monotonous, I'd maybe push back on who you're working with in the firm. If it's monotonous because it's too easy for you, maybe they're giving you too much information, and maybe you can actually take on more work than what they're giving you. And that's always appreciated when you're first starting at a firm. If you ask to do more and take more responsibility, that's just going to make who you're working for, their life easier, and no one's going to say no to that. Being the person that just comes in and does exactly what you're given and not ask any questions, not ask for any more work, not challenge anything is not what people want. People don't want just someone that comes in just as a task doer. They want someone who is critically thinking about the project and looking to find the next step and the next thing to do.
Awesome. Yeah. All great conversation topics. And Jonathan, do you have any final comments you want to add on this question?
Real quick, what I'd say is your mind works differently at different times of the day. And sometimes you don't want to be doing monotonous stuff late in the day when your mind's mush, and it can take longer. It can be, you're less engaged. Structuring the way you work is really, really important. There's certain tasks I like to do early in the morning because my brain's really sharp then, and certain things I really try and avoid late in the day because of that. There's also sometimes things become monotonous and they drag out because you're just not focused on it, or you're interrupted too much. Turn off your email, turn off your phone for an hour. Sometimes that's all you need. We're not doctors. We're not going to get that emergency call that somebody's going to die if you don't answer your email in an hour, right? Nothing we do is that kind of critical. So, just turn it off for a little bit, focus on what you need to do and get it done. That way you can move on to something else. And because I think a lot of my experience has been a lot of the monotony comes from you got to do it, but it just kind of drags out, right? And that you don't want that to happen. So just kind of structuring the way your day works and figuring out how you work so you can tackle the right things at the right times when your mind's kind of like ready for it would be really, really good. And that's a good time to, like Joshua said, it's a great time to talk to whoever you're working with about, is this really supposed to be taking me this long? Is this, is there a faster way to do this? Am I, what's going on with it? And there a lot of times, like, sometimes a manager might not even be aware how monotonous what you're doing is because they may not have understanding your software, or something like that. And, we've got guys that write like C++ routines to, fast track their BIM modeling, right? And so you just never know what resources the firm might have to help you do something if it's a problem like that. Because if you're having the problem, probably somebody else is. So there might be some resources like that. So just, again, communication is kind of like all around just a really good thing.
Awesome. Time for one more question before over with. So we're I'm going to mute you, Joshua, really quick. How have you adapted to keeping yourself healthy mentally and or physically while working at home during the pandemic? And this can also be any advice you have for students who are having to go through classes at this time. So we'll go ahead and start off with Nayanta for this one.
Sure. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, mental health, physical health during this time is really tricky. I found that a desk job became even more of a desk job during this time because it was less going to meetings, less, going to job sites. But definitely I would say, get out for walks. I would try and get out for a walk at lunch breaks whenever I get that chance and not work through lunch. I actually took the COVID time as an opportunity to pull back a little bit on work and not work overtime and get sucked into that hole because I can work from wherever and work from home wherever. So I took the opportunity to pull back and really watch the amount of hours that I was spending and really try and aim closer to that 40 hours and try and get my work done in that time. That helps with your mental health a lot too. Yoga, find different ways to work out, see people safely, go on walks with a friend, things like that. But probably I would hope things that everyone has slowly figured out too on their own during this time.
Awesome. Jonathan, do you have anything you want to add on this topic?
I took up skateboarding. I haven't skateboarded in 35 years, and my girls are at the right age where they're too fast to walk to keep up with, but not quite fast enough to be on a bike. So and I'll make sure we'll have lunch or something like that. We'll go around the block, and just it's been really, I've actually really enjoyed the time through all this, because I've got to spend a lot of time with some young girls in my house, and that's been really neat. And so I think it's taking advantage of the opportunities that you are presented with like that. Why not? Why can't a 47-year-old man go skateboarding, right? But yeah.
All right. Let's jump over to Cullen. If you want to talk on this.
Yeah, I think something I would recommend is being fully engaged in whatever you're doing. So if you're working, turn off the TV, turn off Netflix, especially working from home. A lot of people are really tempted to have that on in the background, or sports game or whatever, but be 100% engaged. When you're working, work, and when you're done, turn off your computer, put it away, and really be engaged with family or at home relaxation time. And then the other thing I would really recommend is goal setting. It's really important to have that method of holding yourself accountable to things. So if you want to improve your physical health, make a goal, set a plan, set a long-term and then short-term goals in order to get to that step, and then find a way to make sure that you're following through, whether that's blocking off time on your calendar to actually go for that walk, or waking up an hour earlier so that you have the energy to do yoga or to work out at the gym, and just making sure that you find the best way for you to work and meet that end goal that you're working towards.
Awesome. Yeah, picking up hobbies has been quite a big topic since COVID has started. Let's jump over to Joshua. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, like what's already been said. I think hopefully at this point everyone's kind of gotten a little bit of idea on how to work during this interesting time. But I know the biggest thing that people in my firm have struggled with is turning off work, because now that you're working in the same place that you live, it's a lot harder to say, all right, I'm not working now. Turn off your email, turn off your computer. So having that hard division between work and home is very important. So understanding that, and I think the biggest thing is going to be what you learn from this period and take forward into when we get back into the office. I know as a firm, what we've been talking about is, and I'm sure this conversation's the same that everyone's having, is, all right, we've proven we can work from home. Now, when we go back into the office, how can we be more flexible to give people that time to actually have a work-life balance? Can we actually start having people work from home 1 or 2 days a week? Can we be more flexible with the hours that we work throughout the day? So I'd use it as an opportunity to take advantage of what you've learned during this period and how you can change how you used to work.
Awesome. And for the closing remarks, we'll jump to Elaine, if you want to give us any final comments.
Well, I'm like Jonathan. I have actually loved this time. I'm naturally an introvert, so working from my little cocoon is really wonderful. I have experienced those blurred lines between work and life. It's really hard, but I have a love-hate relationship with my technology. And one of the things I live in, I live in a home I designed. It's net zero energy with all the smart controls you can imagine. So I have programmed my house to turn all the lights on where I work, in the rooms where I work, during work hours. And when they turn off, I stop working. So super bright space. It keeps me alert, keeps me working, engaged. Then all of a sudden the lights go out and I'm like, oh my gosh, 4 hours just passed. So I don't get sucked into that weird in-between space of time. And it registers. And it was an experiment a few months ago, and it's really worked, having my house tell me when to stop. And I know it sounds a little crazy, but I like it. It works. It works pretty well. I'm also learning to use technology in a way that helps me. I've turned off my work emails from my iPhone. Like you said, nothing we do is that important. I don't have to answer anybody's email immediately. And that is such an enormous revelation. And in case anybody is under any impression that what we do is life and death, you have to understand it's so easy to turn that off and just leave it off. I now only read my work emails from my computer. and it freed up a lot of time. Speaking of freeing up time, I've recovered 2 hours a day because I don't commute. Wow. Right now I've got time to go to my yoga classes. I bought a kayak. I mean, wow. I have so much more time, and I feel so much healthier. I could do this, and I've told the chair of our department, if we decide to offer an online architecture degree, which up until now we didn't think we could ever do, and now we're proving we could, I said, if you decide to do an online architecture degree, I'm here, and then I can live wherever I want. I'm off to the south of France.
All right. Great topics and conversations we've had today. And for those of you who maybe don't have a smart house, I'm sure a phone alarm can work just as well, and setting a timer on that. But that is all the time we have for today. I want to send a sincere thank you to all of our professionals who came and spoke on this topic, especially right now as we start revving up for midterms already, which is crazy. We appreciate kind of this reminder to keep in mind our health and our mental health in this field and this schooling. So if there are any final comments anyone would like to have to say, feel free. But other than that, you all are free to go.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.